note values. We're looking at what is called standard notation. The reason this is called standard notation is it's the standard for notation. It's the most detailed form of musical notation that we use. It is not the only form that we use to communicate musical ideas. So looking at your sheet, what I want you to see is note values. We start with the very first one. It is a whole note. How do you know it's a whole note? Because it's got a big hole in the middle and that's all it is. A whole note, for our purposes right now, is going to get 4 beats. Again, more advanced people are watching this. Hey, you need to give a more detailed explanation. No, we're going to save that for later. For our purposes right now, a quarter note is going to get 1 beat, a half note is going to get 2 beats, and a whole note is going to get 4 beats. That's what we're going to get. A whole note is going to get 4 beats. Now working down your sheet, the next thing that you'll see is a half note. A half note gets 2 beats. And the way you make a half note is you draw a whole note and then you put a stem on it. Then moving forward, a quarter note gets 1 beat. And the way you make a quarter note is by drawing a half note but coloring it in. And then finally, as far as we're going to go today, an eighth note gets 1/2 of a beat. How do you get a half a beat? Well, I'll explain that to you in a minute. How do you draw an eighth note? You draw a quarter note and you put a little flag on it. That's all there is to it. It's really, really simple. Now, let's talk about these notes. If we are thinking in terms of beats in a measure 1, 2, 3, 4, a whole note would just get 1, 2, 3, 4, and it would stop. But if I had to fill a measure with half notes, it would get 1, 2, 3, 4, and it would stop. Quarter notes would be on every beat, because again, a quarter note gets 1 beat. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4. And just as in everything else in life, 2 halves make a whole of anything. If an eighth note gets a half a beat, we have to put 2 of them together to take up 1 beat. So now we get 1, 2, 3, 4. Hope that makes sense to you. So a whole note is going to get 4 beats for our purposes. A half note is going to get 2 beats. Quarter note is going to get 1 beat. And then an eighth note is going to get a half a beat. That means you're going to need 2 of them to fill up the space of 1 beat. There's another way to write music other than standard notation and slash notation, which we looked at earlier, which is just delineating the pulse of the music for you to follow along. There's no real detail in that. Slash notation tells you what chord to play, but it doesn't indicate the exact pitches, and it doesn't indicate exactly when you're to play it, and it doesn't tell you exactly what rhythm. So slash notation is great because it kind of gives you that rough outline, but it leaves you plenty of room to be creative. We like that a lot. Rhythmic notation tells you what chord to play, and it gives you some type of rhythmic guidelines while not giving you the exact pitches. Those notes are, or what we called previously, I think we called them voicings, or I don't know if we went through that whole explanation yet, but how you stack the notes, that the technical term for that is voicing. And you have a lot of freedom with rhythmic notation. The beauty of that is, as we talked about last lesson about stacking notes different ways, it allows me to play the same instrument that someone else is playing in a group, but have an entirely different sound because I choose to play a different set of notes within that same chord. Whereas standard notation gives you exactly the pitch, exactly the rhythm, exactly how long to play it. It's very, very detailed. Now, rhythmic notation looks very similar to standard notation, but if you'll notice on your sheet, the notes are different. Now, the whole note, you'll notice it's more like a diamond or a sideways rectangle, however you want to phrase that. But it's still just a big hole. Then to make that a half note, you put a little flag on it. Then to make that a quarter note, you essentially either fill that in or you just make it one little diagonal line and then you put your stem on it, not a flag, excuse me. And then on your eighth note, it's the same thing as a quarter note, but it gets the little flag on it. Now, when we move down to the strumming patterns in a minute, you're going to see that those eighth notes, they get grouped together. The flag becomes a beam and it connects eighth notes together. So this is all new to most of you. Be patient. Once you get through today, a lot of this is really going to make sense to you, and you're going to think, wow, this is so incredibly easy.